Hello everyone and welcome back to another edition of Indie Book Review. I'm Quinn Buckland and today I am reviewing Borrowed Loyalty by Sahreth, Baphy, Bowden. It is the sequel to Visitor's Blood, which I reviewed back in November, I think? Yeah, anyway. I'm pretty sure it was November. And I got around to reading the sequel and let's get into this, shall we? So, Borrowed Loyalty takes place 5 months after the events of Visitor's Blood. John and Sulru are a part of a resistance with a bunch of vampires. Maluk is keeping Connie safe, who is now pregnant, and yeah, that's basically what people need to know, getting into it and starting it. From there on, it's a lot of testing John and Sulru's loyalty to the vampires and what they're willing to do to continue forward, and John and Connie's continual domestic struggles, with Connie being pregnant and the whole situation on how they deal with births on their planet. It's kind of a whole thing. I found John and Sulru's stories to be way more interesting than Maluk's and Connie's. Especially Connie. She really just wasn't very interesting throughout this. She kind of went into a whole racist thing against the vampires after her mind got brainwashed. It's a whole thing there. Maluk was kind of an asshole throughout. It's kind of just a whole thing there. John and Sulru were really the interesting ones, and just all the shit that they got put through throughout the book. For the most part, the book really is, like, the plot, it really isn't all that bad. It does fall into this thing that I like to call the middle book syndrome, where it's kind of that space where it's the continuation of the first book while leading up to the final book, and it does come through with that. It's not really something that's overly it doesn't take anything away from it, though. All in all, I am going to give plot a 4 out of 5, just because it does fall a little too hard into that mid-book syndrome. Characters. Characters were pretty much the same throughout this one as there was in the first one. There were a lot more characters, and I did find that to be a little confusing after a while, because a lot of these characters, I mean, and understandably so, don't generally have human names. So it's really hard to understand what character is who, their specific genders, and, so on and so forth. It's hard to get to imagine them until they're actually described, even as male or female. Because I would be imagining one vampire as a male, and then turns out it's a female, and vice versa, and it tends to just get a little confusing at times. In terms of the characters as characters, it's like the author does a very, very good job. There wasn't any point where I was like, well, this just clearly a caricature, or this clearly just doesn't seem real, or this character doesn't feel like anybody would actually do this. Like, no, like, the characters are very, very well done. There's just a lot of them, and it does get a little confusing at times. And maybe that's on me, but that's just kind of my thought on it. Characters, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5, just because it does get confusing. The writing is really good. There wasn't at any point where I had to go back and think, well, what the hell did I just read? So on and so forth. Whatever. The writing is just really good. It's clear, it's concise, it's definitely readable. It's a 5 out of 5. Writing is a 5 out of 5. Imagination and research. The author goes so much more in depth into what this world is and how it runs that I can't give this book any more, or I guess any less than a 5 out of 5 in this case. I wish I could give more, actually, because the author does a really good job and really goes into depth into how this world works, way more than what he did in the first book. And don't get me wrong, the first book definitely did a good job of it as well, but it's an introduction. This is more intermediate, this is how this world works, and I'm looking forward to a potential advanced version going even more in depth into how this alien planet works. So, yeah, it's a 5 out of 5 straight up for imagination and research. And finally, the ending. I am not going to do a spoilery ending because there's really not a lot to spoil with this. I mean, I guess there is kind of a little, but not really. Basically, the vampires and the humans meet up. I mean, there's way, way, way more to it that I'm not going to get into for obvious story-related reasons, but it definitely leaves you at the edge of your seat. You really want to know what's going to happen next, and I seriously cannot wait for this next book to come out, because I really want to know how certain things how certain things pan out, because I want to know so bad. So ending does get a 5 out of 5. Like, if it makes me want to continue reading it into the series, then it has to be a 5 out of 5. I have absolutely no problem with where the story is going or how the story ended. It ended on probably the most probable and likely note that it probably should have ended in terms of the second book. I mean, some of that being part of the whole middle book syndrome as well, but where it ended was the logical choice as to where it should. 5 out of 5 on the ending. All in all, I give this book a 9 out of 10. I really enjoyed it. And as I said, I cannot wait until this next book comes out. I just want to read it. I really want to read it. It's probably going to be a bit too. But that's all I got for you guys, so have a good day.